All right, so this week we're going to be talking about critical approaches to literature. So we've already been talking about the writing process and how we get there. And now that we're going to be working with the works, we're going to try and figure out how are we going to criticize the works. It's not really criticizing, it's finding the approaches in which these works have been created. Okay, so we have a whole list. Again, we're going to have a quiz at the end of this. But the things I really want you to be mindful of are the political and social economic approaches, the feminist and queer approaches, geographical approaches, ethnic and cultural approaches, historical approaches, ecological, psychoanalytical, post colonial, biographical, mythological, and structuralist and post structuralist. Some of these things you might be going, be what? Don't worry, I'm going to walk you through it really quick. And hopefully this will help you as you are getting into poetry. And poetry is going to be our next thing. Or it's going to be our first thing that we start working on. That's not our next thing. It's the first thing that we do when we start doing our analytical reviews. Okay, political and social economic approaches is pretty self-explanatory, but the idea here is we want to look at literature in terms of how there's power structures, class struggles, and socioeconomic conditions. Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers really kind of emphasizes that in some way. So I want you to kind of have that in your mindset because a lot of the reading, especially like No Face, when we get into our short stories, what else? There's so many. But anyway, these things in which you look at these socioeconomic approaches into why that is important to the way in which these stories are told. Okay. So this approach focuses on how literature will maybe reflect these socioeconomic socioeconomic conditions. Maybe it challenges, or maybe it reinforces political ideologies, or maybe economic systems or social inequalities. Right? Things where you're like, wow, this reading really stated exactly what we see either currently or during their time. Remember, we're going to be looking at historical contexts as well. You might have heard things like Marxism. I don't know if y'all know Marxism. A lot of that is referencing class struggles. You can Google that if you want. It's not, I'm not saying that's like a big thing in class, but it is a part of understanding political and socioeconomic approaches to literature. So if you want to throw in Marxism into one of your, analytical reviews, go for it. Not even mad about it. An example might be, again, if you are looking at all of my lecture notes and you see a link, click the link. The link always sends you to the reading. You might see like James Baldwin or Jeanette Winterson. You're going to see these names. Click on them. It's going to give you to their work. It's not going to give you a historical context of the artist or the author themselves. It's going to give you the work because the work is what we really care about. The author's information you can pull from historical context, wherever you need to find it. But I'd like you to make sure you take a look at the work we're working with here. Charles Dickens' Hard Times is a good one. You can click through that. If you're looking at that through a Marxist lens, you can explore obviously how the capitalist industrial system impacts the lives of the working class characters. Charles Dickens also did The Christmas Story and Scrooge. You see the connection. By the way, if you haven't, take a look at Charles Dickens' the Christmas Story from the very first line. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. Anywho, first of all, so-and-so was dead. I think it was... I'm the nerd who has the books out and still in their thing. I have to do this too because I really think it's important. Charles Dickens, A Christmas Story. I have to read you the first line because it's absolutely freaking brilliant. Marley was dead to begin with. Can we just talk about that line? Marley was dead to begin with. There was no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. If that wasn't a prelude to what's to come, I don't know what is. Anywho, obviously the Christmas Story does that very, very much. Probably not as much as Hard Times. So, anywho, class struggle. You want to investigate how literature addresses the themes of poverty. You'll see that a lot. Exploitation and wealth disparity. I think I have a lot of that within my works as examples that you can use for your analytical review. Okay, socio-political economic approaches. What's over here? Again, you can, we'll talk a little bit more about it as we get into some of the works, but I just want you to know that's one of the approaches that you can use as a lens to look at the works that we're working with. Okay. All right. We'll have a few poems and I think works from feminist and queer authors. Key concepts here obviously are focusing on gender, sexuality, power dynamics in literature. And as a female, I think this is great. It's powerful, especially a majority of the old canons, they don't have as much female work. Frankenstein is an example of authors who have, great, big, beautiful ideas, but you're like, oh, I didn't know that was written by a woman. All right. Okay. So if you go through and use the feminist lens when we talk about feminist criticism, you're going to look at how literature reflects or perpetuates patriarchal gender norms. We see that it's everywhere. There's no surprise. How there's the marginalization of women. In fact, it's everywhere. It's especially in literature. Literature is a big one. Education's another one. Science is even more so. Anyway, you can utilize that information in the works as we move forward and where you can maybe see those things. That's the lens that you can use for some of our works. You might see a lot of this, especially in Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers, that feminist point, especially when Lovey gets her period. Yeah, kind of shakes you to your bone a little bit. Anyway, with that, we will look at, let's see here, the marginalization of women and the representation of the female experience. I think that's really important to recognize, especially when you look at historically things where women are not considered in, like when you think about when they are doing crash tests, they don't do it for the female body, they do it for the male body. And so you can imagine maybe the more possibilities for injuries during that. When you think about getting medicines or surgeries or things, majority of the time when you look at textbooks, it is revolved around the male body versus the female body. So sometimes females are overlooked in that sense. So when we put it in literature, it's really important because it also puts a lens to understand, like, oh, I get it now. Okay, I see that. So that's the goal in looking at work through that feminist queer view. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Some of you have probably already read it 100 times because it's your favorite. Or A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. So Plath and Woolf are usually the more feminist points of view. When we think about queer theory, it focuses on maybe the non-normative sexualities, identities, relationships, exploration in some way. Let's see here. In challenging heteronormativity and exploring the fluidity of gender and sexual identity. Zoe Leonard, I don't know if she has so much the queer view, maybe a little bit. She has it because she talks a little bit about, because it was written in the 90s, 1992. A big part of the HIV endemic. Anyway, so long story short, we do have a few queer, works that could be used as, you can use the queer theory lens to look into that. In fact, you could use that for just about any work and how it might apply in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be from a queer writer. You can still find these themes pretty much in all of them in some way. I'm sure we could find something. Okay. You can look at Jeanette Witterson and James Baldwin. Again, those names are highlighted. Please take a look at their works. That will very much help you. Geographical approaches. Okay, so the key concepts here are going to be literature that examines the way literature is shaped by place, space, and environment, the geography of it. Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers is written in Hawaiian Creole, which is Hawaii, right? So they're going to be on the Big Island, and she's influenced by her Japanese heritage on this island, and the island matters. It does matter that they're there. This could be anything. No Face, same thing. The historical context of them being, I believe, in Mexico. It doesn't really say, but I think we can infer based on the dialogue that they use. Let's see here. With this perspective, with this lens, this theory of geography, you can include a focus on regionalism, All right. Influence of geography and cultural identity. Again, same thing where it's kind of like when you live in California versus Texas versus the South. These geographies create a different mindset for each one. And in fact, there will be people in California who want to move to Texas because they don't like the fact that they're in California, or, vice versa. Like, geography matters, okay? Whether it's the weather, whether it's the people, whether it's the religions, whether it's the social context, whatever that might be, geography matters. And also it matters in the sense of it gives you a certain feel. In my writings that are most reflective are in the desert. And I do not know why that is, but majority of my reflective work, I feel like my characters need to be in the desert for some reason, whether they're in Arizona or on a trip to Arizona. That kind of is where my brain goes, but maybe that's different for you. Maybe that's different for another author. You have to throw in the historical context of why that geography matters. Again, it could be the difference between a rural or an urban setting. It matters when you have a character in there and the way in which they live. Okay, and so that's just like, as you're going to be reading people's works, where somebody is will be the influence of what that character does. Okay, regionalism is a focus on the unique and cultural and social characteristics of a particular geographical area, right? Again, like I said, if your character is in the city in New York, where in New York? Because that'll matter exactly how they behave. Are they in a rural area? Are they in Texas? Are they in Florida? Are they in, Idaho? Are they in, New England? Like, these, every single time I named a space, your brain could feel out what that character might already be like. Think about, for instance, Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Please take a look at that link. That'll take you to it. When we talk about the Dust Bowl era and the socioeconomic struggles of the migrant workers that were in the American West, right? So we talk about the location can change the socioeconomic status of the person, whatever is going on at that time. Eco-criticism, there's a lot of that I know probably going on around now, talking about ecological, focusing on the portrayal of nature and environment in literature. That gets into like grad school work that can get pretty big, especially within Shakespeare. Well, we could talk about that. Eco-criticism, I appreciate it and I like it. You get really deep when you start getting into how nature plays a role within the literature, and it's good. It's good, but it's deep. So if you want to dive down that path in any of our works, I'm all for it. But that also plays a part into the geographical concepts. Anyway. Lots of things. Okay, so now we're going to get into ethnic and cultural approaches. This is really cool because this is a great opportunity to really hone into understanding either different cultures, maybe your own. It's really great where the literature itself reflects the experiences of a particular ethnic or cultural group. And it emphasizes the issues with identity, racism, and cultural heritage. Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers. I'm just saying, that's a huge part of it. She has a lot of cultural shame for being Japanese and not looking like a haole, which is a white girl, right? She wants to be white. And it's because she has no representation on the TV. All she sees is Shirley Temple. This is why representation is super important for all people, so that they can see themselves out there. But that is a argument and a statement you can work on in any of our works that I throw out there for you. Examples would be African American criticism, which is analyzing literature by and about African Americans that explore the issues of race, identity, history. An example here would be Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Click that link. It's going to send you right there. You can take a look and read through it. These are great experiences to get your feet wet in what these authors are trying to do and how you can see these concepts within the work. So please click on it, take a look at it. We'll talk about this a little bit as well as we go further down, but post-colonial studies. All right, we all understand what colonialism Post-colonial studies often intersect it has cultural criticism that examines the legacies of colonialism in the literature by authors from colonized regions. So if we're going to talk about culture and we talk about colonization, how do these things cross over and what does it look like? What does it look like to have a culture that was, dominated by a colonialism? Take a look at Chinwenyu. I don't know how you say that last name. Things Fall Apart. I have that book here somewhere. Things Fall Apart. Things Fall Apart. That's a book you want to take a look at. I have a link in there for you. And then The God of Small Things. I don't know if I have that one. Give me a second. I don't. Anyway, so The God of Small Things is another one where it has the exact conversation we're talking about here. Take a look at those, click on them. Again, I want you to see how the post-colonialism is intersecting with these these cultural and ethnic approaches. Now we go into historical. Okay, key concepts here. You want to make sure that when you're reading your works, you're also always paying attention to whether the historical approaches in the works, whether it's the historical context, whether it's analyzing historical events, like Gone with the Wind, by the way, I'm reading. I haven't even finished. I haven't gotten through half of it. It's big. Anyway, how historical events, movements, ideologies influence these themes within the books, right? This approach can help to uncover how literature responds and critiques cultural, political, and social conditions of its time. Yeah, my brain went to Gone with the Wind and the way it does that within the book. Again, Scarlett is the anti-hero for sure. Anyway, historical context is really important within each work, and it's important when you're reading it to make sure, when we're talking about critical reading, what is the history being used for within it? Is it being applied? Is it a criticism towards? Is it just to make a context to understand why the characters do what they do? Because it matters, right? Where they are, what time they're in, the space, it all matters on how these characters react, because either a social influence, a historical influence, or a cultural influence. Okay, historical materialism is an example of a way in which you can look at something with a historical context, where it reflects or engages in the material conditions and the social structures of its time. Okay, think about 1984, George Orwell. If you read it now, you're like, oh, what? How? We're not too far away from exactly what George Orwell was talking about. You get to read it, you'll see. Anyway, so his view on the world, when it was supposed to be 1984, which was the future for George Orwell, his commentary was based on totalitarianism. Sorry, tongue ties. Seashells in the seashore. Totalitarian. Okay, whatever. Y'all know what I'm saying. Okay, in the historical context of the post-World War II politics, well, it has an influence. He saw it preemptively, and it's still coming. So anyway, just looking at historical context and how we can see how things have influenced, how they might influence us even further. There's films out there that do that very often. I can't think of anything right now, but maybe I'll throw some out there when we start thinking about historical context within films, where they try and talk about the future and what 2025 is going to look like. We're already there. Were those things accurate, and how were they accurate, and why were they accurate? And a lot of it is because, again, history tends to repeat itself. You can also look at cultural history and how the historical events, maybe wars, revolutions, social change, the revolutions, the industrial revolutions, how have those impacted change within the literature that you're reading? So, all right. Ecological approaches. It's the relationship between literature and the environment. Ecological and the feminism. I got a book here that might work here. Okay, I do not. You also saw that I was wearing sweatpants. Anyway. I have a really good book on this, ecological approaches into feminism, something like that. Anyway, it was a really good book that I read when I was in college. I'll find it. Okay, eco-criticism and ecological approaches to literature study the relationship between literature and the environment and how they apply. Okay, how does nature, animals, and the environment, how are they represented in the literature, and how are they reflect the critique of humanity's relationship with the natural world? All right, when we talk about the feminine and nature usually go hand in hand, and the way humans treat nature is very similar to how they treat the feminine. And so there's that connection there. So you could see within a certain work, if they are destroying the environment, you might also know the characters are also destroying the feminine in some way. So there you can find that critique. So anyway, these things to be considerate of as you were talking about the culture, the ecological influence within the book and how they apply. Anyway, nature writing is like Henry David Thoreau. He did Walden, I believe. Walden, and the link that I have here actually goes to. Let me see, what did it go to? It was one of his political. That's right, civil disobedience. So that's a part. Civil disobedience is also part of Thoreau's. I have that book here too somewhere because I'm sick and I have a lot of books. Anyway, his was what was the other one he did? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Rachel Carlson, she has another piece in there too. You can take a look at. It's called Silent Spring. Anyway, and then these are just works in which they talk about humans within nature. Henry David Thoreau, take a look at that. A lot of his work is very much Emerson. Emerson's the other one. Walden by Emerson. Take a look at those. They're heavy, but they're also influential, and they've been very influential since as far as I can remember. Okay. Also think about environmental justice and where there's literature that focuses on global warming, deforestation, and it's almost often with marginalized or indigenous communities. Let's see what I got here. I have a few here that I haven't thrown in yet, but we talk about that one won't be one we're looking for. Oh, what do you know? That was Judy Blume. Not Sherman Alexie, but The Touch the Earth. There's some books that I have out there that reflect, we all understand, and for the most part we know, we see the research that natives, as they took part in taking care of the environment, there's a prolonged life of the environment based on the way they would take care of it versus the way capitalism and colonialism, take over the land. So anyway, you will see a lot of writings and readings, especially as we move forward. I don't think I include anything, but if you find something you'd love to utilize within one of the works, whether it's a poem or, short story or drama, anything, you let me know. If it's something that you're passionate about and you want to do an environment or analytical review on. Absolutely. All right. Psychoanalytical reviews or analysis. These approaches, you're going to see a lot of this you could use in Wild Meat and the Bully Burger because girl got some problems. But there's a reason for that. It's that cultural influence. It's the societal influence. It's the feminism influence. It's all of it. But I think the psychoanalytical approach to Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers is... It's so easy. It's like, shooting fish in a barrel kind of thing. This approach is usually rooted in Freudian theory. What is his name? Jung, Jung. His theories. Anyway, a psychoanalytic criticism explores how the characters and the themes and the narratives reflect unconscious desires, fears, and conflicts. And you see that throughout Wild Meat the whole time. You will see it in quite a few of the short stories too. With this approach, you're recognizing the symbolic, you will be examining the symbolic, psychological aspects of a text. You're going to be looking at things like oppression. You're going to be looking at the Oedipus effect. Everyone, I use that one all the time. You can look that one up if you want. I'll put a link in there. The role of the unconscious in storytelling, how that all plays out. I love the psychoanalytical review of characters. I think it is so much fun. I think it's like one of my favorite things to do within literature because like, oh, girl got drama, right? Okay. So the Freudian analysis, if you're to use that lens, you're looking at repressed desires or psychological conflicts which influence the character. You see that a lot with Levy and her relationship with her father. A psychoanalytic reading of Kafka's The Metamorphosis. Oh, you got to read The Metamorphosis. It's a little bit longer on a short story, but it's still worth the read, if that makes sense. So much goes on in that. Anyway, you can look into that. You've got guilt, you've got alienation, family dynamics for sure. So much going on. In the Jungian analysis, it focuses on the archetypes and the collective unconscious, often analyze mythical patterns within literature. So there's all kinds of different approaches. Those are just options. Those are just examples. I just throw them out there to give you a little bit of something. You can always come back to this particular thing when you go to do your analytical reviews. And then post-colonial approaches. We kind of talked a little bit about this already, but concepts include post-colonial criticism, in which it analyzes literature from former colonies to examine the effect of colonialism on identity, culture, and history. Like, we know it's there. We see it. It's still there. It's within our system. And you will see that within our system, it still creates that. In fact, it's going back into that again. And you see that a lot in literature very often. It critiques the ongoing legacies of imperialism and the struggle for independence and self-representation in literature. And we talk about that when we talk about Western literature as we move forward from, world literature and what that looks like. Salman Rushdie, take a look at his work. Again, anytime you see the name of an author and there's a link, go to that. That's their work. Okay. And I don't know how to say this other author's name. Forgive me, so I'm not going to destroy it. And I'm sure you're all on the other side going, oh, this is how you say it. Let me know. Help me. Anyway, Thiongos. Anyway, these are the great works. I feel really bad that I have the works of these authors, but I don't really know how to say their names because, anyway, I'm embarrassed. These explore the impact of colonialism on national identity and culture. Okay. And me not being able to say their names is a key part of the whole point of having these conversations. What does it mean that, that it is, I struggle with having the correct pronunciation of these names, right? And it's always been that way with me. I hate it. It happens. I'm working on it. Apparently not hard enough. Okay, so the othering of indigenous or colonized peoples is a key theme in post-colonial studies. You're going to see that very often. Joseph Conrad's The Heart of Darkness and Jean Rye's Wide Sargasso Sea. So again, click on those. They're going to send you straight to it. Heart of Darkness I have here somewhere. It's over on that side. I only know because I know the back of the cover is black with red writing. Anyway, so take a look at those. Those are going to give you some really good ideas in understanding post-colonial approaches to works and how there's that influence. Biographical approaches, again, for these, you want to consider the author's life experience, their historical context, and their personal life beliefs as a lens through which they interpret their works. I'm surprised I didn't put Salman Rushdie in this list as well. Anyway, that being the case, you want to make sure that when you are using the biographical, their personal experiences, you really get the correct information on this, actual historical context of their lives and their experiences, and not just assumptions. Just a little hint when you're doing research. Make sure that you also understand that how the author's life provides insight into the themes, into the characters, and into the events. Wild Meat and the Bully Burger, absolutely. There's an influence there because while it is a fictional book, there's a lot of personal experience that you could tell that Lois Ann Yamanaka included within her work. All right. An example, Emily Dickinson does that in her poems. Same thing with Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf had a lot of mental illnesses. You can see it in her work. Mrs. Dalloway is one of the more prominent ones that you will see her have a conversation with. Anyway, if it has the work, click on it, take a look. Gives you some examples. Mythological approaches. I don't know how much. Well, I think you probably apply this to a lot of works, but you might be reaching in some of them. But mythological concepts are looking at the use of the myths, archetypes, and universal patterns in literature. It's based on the idea that certain themes and symbols reoccur across culture and time periods, often representing fundamental human experiences of or conflicts. Mythological. I mean, I know you all right now, if you've got the same algorithms going in your social media, I see this often with the myths, all the different memes. There's a lot out there that you could really apply to this. Sometimes it's subconscious. You might not realize, the author might not realize they're doing it. You can point it out and you can do an argument for the idea of the myth that they're using within their work. Again, usually it's the archetypes that stand out, or sometimes certain, again, universal patterns that you might see. Anyway, so yeah, take a look at that. Joseph Campbell's Monomyth. It uses the hero's, you'll hear a lot the hero's journey. Iliad is that. In fact, Lord of the Rings, oftentimes people will compare it to like the Christianity and the journey, and because what's his name was very Christian. Anyway, blah blah blah. You'll see the myth of the hero's journey is in a lot of works. That'll be something that you can probably pull out from a few. I don't know if you could pull that from Wild Meat and the Bully Burger. She's not quite the hero in the journey. She's more of an anti-hero. But anyway, archetypes identifies recurring character types, whether it's symbols or motives, or like there's the old man, the wise old man, Gandalf, you know, the heroes, and then the shadow, the thing that's always behind them, that's following them. Think about Elf, the movie. That still has a little bit of a hero's journey, if you didn't notice. Anyway, it's kind of like a theme. That's just, you know, an everyman story in a way. Last but not least, I'm coming to the end, I promise you, structuralist and post-structuralist approaches, which the criticism focuses on uncovering deep structures of language, native, and cultural codes that shape the meaning in texts, the intention behind it. Post-structuralism challenges the idea of a stable meaning, arguing that meaning is fluid and subjective. Oh, I'm sorry. That it shapes meaning. Hold on. Post-structuralism. Oh, that's right, because structuralism is structure. Y'all, I'm 30 minutes in. My brain's gooey goo. All right. So structuralism is talking about how there is structure to it. There's codes, there's meaning, there's a thing. Post-structuralist is talking about that it's more fluid than that. That it challenges the idea of the stable meanings. It argues that meaning is fluid and that it's shaped by language and context. Meaning, if you're a structuralist, you believe that there's always a meaning in text. It's always meant to be this way. There's an intent, there's a code, it does this. But if you're a post-structuralist, your idea is like, no, it's fluid. It could mean this. It's like, hey, man, I don't know. You're kind of going with it. And it is, again, based on language and context within the work. So you can argue many works on either side. It's really, you'll once you get into the literature, you're going to see it and go, oh, I see this leans into the structuralist versus the post-structuralist. You're gonna see the two in the works and decide which one you feel, you know, goes with either. It's a little heavier and it's a little deeper. It's a little leaning into the grad work, but if you want to elevate yourself within your analytical review, go for it, dear. All right, structuralism, again, focused on the underlying structures that govern the narrative. You could look at Roland Barthes and Claude Lévi-Strauss. Again, click those links. They're going to give you the examples. The structuralists examined that the binary oppositions in literature, life versus death, good versus evil, always exist, and how those particular black and white points move the text, right, and how they shape what the text is saying. if you're talking about post-structuralism, it's arguing that meaning is never fixed and it's always open to interpretation, right? I don't know. I might lean a little more towards that as someone who reads literature, but it depends on the work, right? Jaquez? Y'all, I'm losing it right now. Anyway, Derrida's deconstruction theory, for example, examines how their own meaning and destabilize the established interpretation. So take a look at that work. This part's heavy. This part is very heavy. This is grad work stuff. Like, you can get into it if you want. I mean, God bless you if you can. But I'm not pushing too hard for structuralist versus post-structuralist analyzing of works. It's very heavy. It's very thick. You don't need to go down that way. It is an example, okay? And it's just a type of approach that you can come to for works. But again, it's grad school work. If this is not, your MO, if you're not like me, working towards trying to be an English teacher, you don't have to worry about this particular one. The biggest things I want you to look at, again, is going to be, you're probably going to throw in a bunch of different things, whether it's biological, whether it's historical, cultural for sure, things that stand out to you. And it doesn't have to be big, huge things. It could just be a commentary on the culture behind, a particular author, like where they came from, how they grew up, and how that might have an influence on their work. That's what we're looking at here when we're talking about different approaches. For analytical reviews, they're going to be short. They're going to be about 3 pages. I would like them to be a little bit bigger, but you don't have to go above and beyond too much. I just want you to show me your understanding of the material. So, any whoosies. After this, there's a quiz, as there is always a quiz. And feel free to kind of go back and do the readings. The goal here is I'm pushing you to do more work for yourself than me having to constantly do quizzes and all these big things when, I would like you to be in the habit of taking it upon yourself to do the work, to find these pieces within the works without me having to go, oh, can you please reanalyze blah, blah, right? Anyway, I have faith in you. Enjoy the quiz. Start feeling more confident in the material and the way in which we're approaching these works, and message me if you have questions. As we move forward, this will make more sense, but for now, I'm giving you a lot in hopes that it'll start to digest, so when we get into the bigger things, you'll go, this makes sense. So anyway, message me if you have questions. Very proud of all the work you're about to do, and I'll see you on the other side.